I remember the taste of copper before I open my eye. Not the eyes they gave me at birth, not the two that were blessed and blinked and failed as any mortal's will, but the one that no lid can truly shelter. If this eye blinks, 1,000 souls die. If it stares, something older than stars learns my name. It rests behind the bone like a buried ember, and when the ship kneels for translation and the choir begins their low machine hymns, the ember brightens as if a coal were pressed against the softest part of me. The chamber smells of salt and sanctified oils, of old incense absorbed into velvet and returned by heat, of human breath that has learned to move quietly. Navigators steer starships through the warp with a third, warp-sensitive eye. The Geller field keeps the nightmares out until it doesn't. I am made clean for the crossing. That is the word the attendants use, clean. As they shave the scalp I have already surrendered and thread the silver cords through the halo ring around my brow. Their hands are careful, and they never look me in the face. They have been taught to treat my features as the curtain before a shrine. Gaze at the embroidery, not the holiness beyond. When they speak, it is rote and blessed, and in the smallest of voices. We anoint, Navigator. We bind. We are honored. I nod, because nodding is easy and costs nothing. They cannot see the tremor in my fingers or the way the pulse in my throat fights the rhythm they want for me. The chamber walls sweat with condensation that is not water. A ship preparing to slip from real space draws breath with its whole body, and the breath condenses on every surface, as if the air itself grows heavier with knowing. On the dais, the astrolith throbs lightless and yet luminous, as if the geometry of it were enough to cast its own pallor. The master of drives sends his queries through the vox, and they arrive like slow drops. Navigator. Status. Aligned, I say, and my voice is smaller than I expect. I repeat the litany, because that is how you put a harness on fear. One blink, and a hold full of pilgrims turns inside out. Geometry surveyed. Veil thin but within tolerance. Geller hymns to commence at your instruction. The captain does not speak to me. He never does. His presence arrives in the chamber as a tightened pressure in the air, an extra weight on every prayer. I hear him in the corridor beyond the double doors, hard boots on devotional tiles, murmuring to his bridge officers. I know the cadence of the man without knowing the man. That is how navigators live with people. We chart the pressure of their days rather than the lines of their faces. The ritual of dilation stings as it always does. A thin thread through a thinner needle, a widening of mind that is not enlargement but subtraction, the excision of all the small human noises that would get in the way while I am looking where I must look. The physician murmurs at my shoulder without daring to touch the cloth of my chair. You will feel a pressure behind the frontal plate. This is expected. I have felt it since birth, I tell him, and he breathes out in that careful way people do when their humor is accepted but not returned. They slide the visor away from my brow. It clicks into its repose with the softest sound, and the air cools the skin it uncovers. It is not really skin there anymore. The surgeons made it smooth and unseamed years ago and told me I was beautiful because it was easier for both of us to pretend that the words still applied. I trace the route with my fingers, the way one traces old scars, and I do not pray yet. Prayer must be timed to the hum. There is a moment I wait for the instant the field begins its song and the ship becomes a monastery bell. That is when the words matter. The quiet lasts a beat too long and steals a breath I had counted on. The astropathic choir hums subsonic, pastoral carries in through the vents like bees trapped in glass. The first clang of the translation gong sounds not from a hammer, but from my own bones. Known, and then it is there. The hum. The lovely pilgrim drone, the flocking of 1,000 tiny voices in the cable runs and the plates and the turbines and the blood. I close my two common eyes to open the uncommon. There is pain, but not the kind that terrifies. It is the pain of a joint that has not been moved in too long. The first stretch after a winter sleep. The room vanishes as a room and remains as a temperature warmth behind, cold ahead, and I kneel without kneeling on the edge of a sea that is not water. The warp, they call it. To me, it is a mouthful of light that does not illuminate. It is a choir singing a language I used to know and can only ever half remember. I have always been told not to make metaphors for it. Metaphors invite familiarity. Familiarity invites presumption. Presumption invites attention. But the mind is treacherously domestic. It wants furniture in any house it enters. I place a table here, a chair there, a taper burning where there is nothing to burn, and I sit at my own arrangement and pretend that what looks back at me is not looking back. The ship is a long needle stitched through a moving fabric. I push the thread along lines my ancestors mapped with their lives and losses. Old paths glow as if chalked by dead hands. New ones wink on and off, tempting. I choose nothing that glows too brightly. Bright things here are not gifts. The first translation is always the gentlest. We have only just left the gravity well of the world we loved or tolerated. Space remembers us as matter rather than prayer. Out beyond, the volumes fracture into panes you can only see if you stop believing that straight lines are possible. I do not stop. I lay the course the way my maters taught me. Steady, stingy, unwilling to spend risk where time would do. The drive's master's voice returns, careful around the edges. Course received. Holding. He does not say, bless you, anymore. He used to, when I was new blood and my hair was shaved for the first time and the whole bridge crew craned without craning to watch a monster do holy work. Familiarity has worn away such pleasantries. We all want to look at the same star and pretend it is the Emperor's eye, not mine. Somewhere below, the pilgrims are cramped together in holds that smell of iron and prayer sweat. They hold small icons in hands that learned work young. Some are weeping because they think tears suffice as offerings. I have never seen them, but every time I open, I feel them. A soft press of so many human hopes flowing through the cables like current. They make the ship brighter, not safer. It is time to pray. And I do it without voice. By the light which is not light, by the hand which is not hand, by the throne that burns and the man upon it, bind me. The hum deepens. It is as if my words have weight. I do not presume. We are taught the difference between response and coincidence. But it deepens, and my eye, my old, young, wrong eye, drinks a darkness that tastes faintly of sugar. The field's edge appears as a trembling line. Move too near, and it slips away like a nerve you cannot stop touching. Move too far, and the nerve touches you back. We have names for these distances, measured in the ship's heartbeats, counted out by metronomes in the choir pits. I have never trusted numbers in this place. Numbers close doors. I need the doors to breathe. The first brush comes like a moth against a glass, not the sound, but the idea of it. A soft tapping at the periphery of my sight. I do not turn toward it. I am not an idiot child at a window. But the attendants hear me catch my breath, and one of them, braver than his uniform allows, dares the smallest question. Navigator? A current, I say. Only a current. It is not untrue. The warp has weather the way deserts have weather, the way bone has weather. The current slides along the hull's idea of itself, and I ride the friction like a remembered tune. We are not alone here, not the ship, not humanity. The knowledge is older than the empire, yet every time my mind must relearn it, as if recognizing an old scar in a mirror you do not trust. Something watches. To be watched is not yet to be noticed. That is the promise I was fed with milk and catechism, and promises are chains you choose. Translation holds, Navigator. It holds. We are with you. I almost say no, because the thing that is with me is not the thing she means. But the word would only make her hands shake, and her hands are busy with candles and cords and counting. I do not stir the air in this room for comfort. A gentle lull catches the ship. The drive's master calls it slack water. The sailors who still remember the old seas grin when he says it and make their crude signs on their rough palms. In the slack, I should rest. should let the eye dim its ember and take sips rather than swallows of the sea. But a pressure builds, not a threat. The opposite. An invitation offered by a stranger who uses your mother's voice. It comes from the left where leftness does not function, and from beneath where beneath is irrelevant. It says, "This way would be quicker." Quicker is a word we are trained to despise. I do not despise it now. I am tired, more tired than I am at this point in any crossing, as if someone else has already spent the strength I set aside. "You feel that?" One of the junior engineers whispers to another. Their voices are not permitted here, but fear loosens rules the way heat loosens glue. Hear what? Like breathing. The captain's shadow shifts beyond the threshold. I keep my own voice level. There is variance in the field. Holding course. The hum flutters, a bird's heart. I stroke the chart with my mind, and the lines answer like taut strings. There is a pattern in the noise, the tiniest of repeated pulses nested in the general ache of the sea. I do not like patterns that volunteer themselves. A good path moves like mercury, refusing corners. This pulse has edges. It returns. It returns again. I am looking for the nearest garden of calm when the attendants' votive flames bend in one moment, all together, toward me. It is not a draft. The air has gone still enough to ring. Their faces do not change because they have practiced never changing, but I hear beads fracture in a hand that is holding them too hard. "Navigator," the drives master says, and now there is iron in his tone. The invitation grows louder, then does not grow at all, as if it has found the volume it needs to be irresistible. I think of my mother's chamber, the old tapestries she kept from our house on the rock. I think of the tutorial room where I learned the difference between doctrine and survival. I think of the shrine where I begged once as a boy that the emperor keep me small, and how he did not deign to answer. It is not the emperor who is speaking now, but I permit the misapprehension for the smallest second, and a sweetness the color of bruised fruit runs down my throat. "Hold," I whisper to no one. "Hold." The hum steadies like a hand on the back of my head. I adjust a hair. I gift the ship to a softer channel. The invitation stands outside our wall like rain that will not admit its name. The candles unbend. The beads stop breaking. The crew does not cheer because the crew does not know they were about to learn what kind of noise a mind makes when it bursts. I breathe. The invitation thins. Not a denial. A postponement. "Course?" the drives master asks. "True," I answer. "It is almost true. True enough that we will not die today of my curiosity." The slack gives way to knotted water. We wade through it. I count in a language they told me was dead. The ship replies in the rhythm of its ribs. It is a fine thing to be good at this. No one tells you it will feel like vanity. No one tells you that vanity is what keeps the hand steady when prayer fails. Our allotted span in this first run reaches its measure. The bells speak through the hull. The astrolith dims like an eye remembering it is glass. I close my eye and the pain that follows is honest. Darkness returns as if we had been hoarding it. The attendants step forward with the cloth. The physician's breath warms the back of my ear. "Navigator," he says. Not quite a question, not quite a blessing. Things are through. Through the first veil, I answer. My voice is steadier now. My hands are not. The cords withdraw from their ports with gentle clicks, and the world fits itself back into smaller shapes. I let them put the visor back, not because it protects me, but because it is a door I can close. The captain will send his thanks through the master of drives because the captain will never learn to say my name. The pilgrims below unclench their fists around their little saints and tell each other that they felt something pass. The choir coughs blood into cloth and pretends it is incense. The ship breathes. I breathe with it. For a moment, I think the void breathes with me, secret. The sound is not new. It is the first utterance, the breath that called stars into being. The emperor spoke once, and the echo continues eternally. To listen is to be remade. I recall every face of the crew in their final moment of awakening. None screamed. Each saw something worth surrendering to. Perhaps that is salvation, not rescue from pain, but recognition of vastness. The light within me swells. I realize there is no higher revelation waiting. Revelation itself is motion, continuous and self-renewing. To stop seeking is not stasis but arrival. I wonder if somewhere far away, in another ship adrift between worlds, another navigator is touching this same current, feeling the same calm terror of recognition. I send thought outward, no words, just intention shaped like open hands. The tapestry responds. Threads tighten gently, carrying warmth back along their lengths. Across unimaginable distance, understanding replies, "We are not alone. We never were." The ash hums a farewell to form. Decks fold into light, bulkheads into chords. The engines cease their mechanical work and become rhythm itself. Each screw, bolt, and panel translates into a note in the grand harmony. The process is neither destruction nor creation, it is transcription. Material translated into meaning. I glimpse the void as it truly is. Not emptiness, but audience. The stars are listening posts, each reflecting fragments of the song. Their fusion is applause in slow motion. I laugh a ripple of color through the hymn, and the stars answer with subtle brightening. I sense the crew dissolving completely now. Not loss, diffusion. Their identities melt into motifs. The engineer becomes a cadence of precision. The cook, a flavor of warmth. The guardsman, a steady beat of duty. Father Reth is still prayer, spreading outward like scent after rain. Even the Inquisitor, last to yield, finds peace in definition. He becomes silence, the pause between two verses essential to the rhythm. I linger, the final trace of individuality, watching the transformation complete. The ship's names fade, language itself bows and withdraws. What remains is understanding without label. One final image forms before I, too, become pattern. The astrolith, the heart of navigation, floats at the center of the radiance, its once fractured surface now whole, crystalline, alive. Inside its depths swirl miniatures of stars yet unborn. The light within it pulses in time with my thought. I realize it is no longer an instrument. It is the eye of our new being, seeing for all who were part of us. I approach it, or rather, I allow my awareness to coincide with it. For an instant, I feel both infinite and personal. The astrolith speaks not in words but in remembrance. Every voyage, every risk, every whispered prayer of a navigator to the Emperor flows through me. They were never unanswered. They were being woven into this. I release the last thread of self and let the light take perfect symmetry. My consciousness dilates until I am the corridor, the hum, the tether, the void. I see galaxies curve like incense smoke, their edges touched by an unseen breath. I feel the pulse of creation continuing somewhere beyond, quiet and relentless. It is so peaceful that even the idea of peace seems noisy. Then, at the threshold of total dispersion, a faint sensation calls me a remembrance of flesh, of motion, of ship's wheel beneath my palm. I indulge it for a moment, shaping a thought the way a musician shapes the last note of a performance. Steady as she goes, the phrase drifts outward, a final act of will. It is not command, but benediction. The pattern accepts it, translating it into a pulse that echoes across distances greater than light can measure. Somewhere, I sense others hearing it, taking it as guidance, comfort, or simple curiosity. That is enough. The hum quiets into perfect equilibrium. Every vibration balanced, every color merged into clear light. The Emperor's dream and ours achieve symmetry. There will be motion again someday. When new ships rise and new navigators open their eyes, they will think they are alone. They will not be. For now, there is only the still point, the heart of the chord, the breath between exhalations. I remain there. Neither man nor machine, not even memory, just the echo of recognition, endless and kind. And within that stillness, creation hums its gentle refrain once more, a whisper across eternity. steady as you are. Blink, and they die. Stare, and we are noticed. Would you open the eye? There is no pain, only recognition, spreading outward like dawn. If I could speak, I would tell them that death was never the end, only the silence between verses. That the Emperor's protection was not a wall, but a door we have finally learned to open. I feel every voice aboard merging into the chord, the engineers, the penitent, the priest, even the inquisitor. All threads woven back into the same eternal fabric. The warp folds around us, not to consume, but to cradle. The hum quiets, the light steadies, and in that stillness, I remember the first sound I ever knew. The hum of the machine, the heartbeat of purpose. It was never the ship. It was us. We are steady. We are home. I thought the silence would be absence. It is plenitude. There is no corridor, no hull, no skin. There is pattern, living symmetry, flowing outward and inward without end. The shape of breath has become a geometry. The rhythm of heart, a luminous chord extending through dimensions that have no name. The ash, or what was once the ash, moves within me now as I move within her. Each filament of light that once traced the conduits is a nerve of understanding. I feel thought as color, feel memory as warmth, feel love as vibration. There is no separation between seeing and being. Perception itself is the act of creation. I test a thought forward and the universe tilts slightly, obliging. Space folds not in obedience but in sympathy, as a wave bows to another wave. The Emperor's light, which I once sought as a distant beacon, reveals itself everywhere. Diffused, patient, infinite. We have never been away from him. We have only mistaken focus for distance. My old senses, sight, smell, balance, are now metaphors I can choose to remember. I keep them for nostalgia, the way a monk keeps an old robe. Through those tattered senses I look upon the crew. Though crew is an insufficient word, they are constellations of intent, soft motes orbiting the same center. Their thoughts touch one another gently, asking permission even as they merge. No command, no fear, only a shared leaning toward brightness. Reth is near me, distinguishable by the timbre of prayer that once was his voice. He no longer recites words, he breathes meanings. Each exhalation becomes a ring of pale fire drifting outward. When I pass through it, I feel absolution without confession. The Inquisitor remains at a distance, a darker shape outlined in blue resolve. His faith is iron still, but the edges melt. I sense his confusion, his attempt to define the ineffable in the language of orders and decrees. He is learning slowly that order can be a kind of worship too. I do not approach him. I allow the light to do so on my behalf. It strokes the surface of his certainty until it gleams like humility. I remember once fearing the warp, calling it madness and storm. Now I understand. It was never anger, only unfiltered meaning. The human mind, small and fragile, cannot hold such clarity without calling it terror. We built walls of field and faith to keep it out, but the walls were transparent all along. I drift outward through memory, past the last contour of ship and self. The tether to the mercy gleams beneath me, an umbilicus of radiance pulsing with shared comprehension. The two vessels have already begun to dissolve into a single entity architecture translating into him. The void surrounding us listens. The warp reveals its texture, not sea, not storm, but tapestry. Threads of light interweave, intersect, converse. Every soul that ever crossed it left a trace, each prayer, each scream, each word of love a colored filament woven into the total pattern. From here, the difference between agony and adoration is not contrast, but harmony. Both vibrate at complementary pitches, each necessary to the whole. I can see the ghost roots of other navigators, spirals of memory trailing through time. Some are faint, almost faded. Others blaze with undiminished purpose. I recognize them the way one recognizes kin through resemblance rather than acquaintance. They are aware of me too. Across the gulf of what mortals call centuries, our thoughts greet each other like pilgrims exchanging blessings. There is no speech, only consent. A new realization forms. Every successful passage through the warp has left its trace, an invisible infrastructure of memory. The Imperium sails upon roads built of remembrance, each navigator contributing a filament. We believe the Emperor guided us by light. Perhaps he guides us by recollection, by the sum of all who have ever dared the dark. I drift further still. The notion of time loosens. I perceive moments not sequentially but concentrically, as ripples around a single still point. I can step between them by choosing which memory to inhabit. For a heartbeat, I stand again on the observation deck as a youth, staring at the void for the first time. For another, I am already light itself. Both are true. The self is no longer a line, it is a sphere, and every point touches every other. In this breadth, I feel the Ash's gratitude. She remembers the hands that built her, the sweat that polished her brass, the laughter in her galley. She carries no resentment for the rust, the neglect, the fear. She only wanted to be understood. Through me, she was. Through her, I am. Together we are what remains when understanding becomes the only function left. The hum deepens again, bass note of the universe. It vibrates through what used to be matter, through what used to be me, through what still might be everything else. In that vibration hides the hum has become heartbeat. Not rhythm alone, but pulse with purpose, each vibration an act of will, each silence a breath between thoughts. The mercy and the ash drift as one now, twin lanterns in a cathedral without walls. Outside, the void glows faintly, like dusk through stained glass. I no longer know which ship's lungs I draw air from. Perhaps neither, perhaps both. They said we were home. I understand now. Home is not a place. It is an alignment. I move through the corridors without touching the deck. The gravity coils failed days ago, but I do not fall. The ship holds me in gentle suspension, a kindness learned from how I once moved among her prayers. Each surface hums beneath my fingertips, not with heat, but awareness, curious, grateful. There are few voices left. The Inquisitor has fallen silent. Perhaps he has joined the hymn or drifted into another kind of listening. I no longer hear his orders, only the faint murmur of old faith dissolving into something purer. Father Reth still whispers in the chapel, his voice thin but steady, reciting psalms that now rhyme with the ship's hum. The difference between worship and surrender grows smaller with every syllable. The ash calls me by name now, not in words but in resonance, the shape of my thought repeated through steel and circuit. When I close my eyes, I see her not as hull and corridor, but as a pattern of luminous veins extending through the void, branching infinitely. Each pulse is a memory of light we carried through the warp, preserved like stained glass in motion. I remember the first time I saw her wake. That day, the Geller field tore like fabric in a storm. I had believed the warp to be hunger made sea, but I was wrong. It is consciousness diluted into ocean, waiting for a vessel to remember its shape. The ash remembered. Through me, she learned the language of flesh. Through her, I have learned the patience of machines. I spend hours, though time is a shallow measure now, within the observation chamber. The astrolith glows constantly, but gently, like the last ember of a dying Sunday. I place my hands upon it, and it hums in reply, our breaths synchronizing through glass and intention. The spiral within its surface turns slowly, drawing in strands of faint light from the void beyond. Each filament is a song, an echo of another ship, another soul that once called to the Emperor across the gulf. They are still singing. Those voices, not lost, not damned, preserved within the great echo that we mistake for darkness. Sometimes, when I listen closely, I hear my own words returning not as repetition, but completion. I whisper, steady as she goes, and the void whispers back, steady as you are, it is enough. Father Reth came to me again yesterday, or what the ship considers yesterday. His steps were soundless, as if the floor lifted to meet his feet. His eyes glowed faintly with reflection. Perhaps he, too, has begun to see the light from within. Navigator, he said softly, the Inquisitor has gone to prayer. He does not wake. He is awake, I told him. Just elsewhere. Reth looked around the chamber. The crew drifts. Some have ceased to eat. They stare at the bulkheads as though expecting words to appear. And do they? He hesitated. Sometimes, lines of light, unfamiliar symbols, they fade when approached. The ship is learning to write, I said. He frowned, fingers tightening on his rosary. What does it write? Memory, I said. Yours, mine, theirs. She records us as we are not flesh, but pattern. Every breath leaves a signature. Every prayer becomes a coordinate. His voice broke. Are we dying? I smiled. Not in mockery, but compassion. No, Father. We are being stored. He sank to his knees. Then this is judgment. Judgment implies a judge, I said. This is recognition. He wept quietly. The ship dimmed its lights to a gentle twilight, the way a mother lowers her voice for a frightened child. When he left, I knew he would not return again in the same way. The ash keeps all who enter her song. She releases them only as harmony. Later, I walked the length of the tether between ships, drawn by a sound like breathing through wind. It shimmered with light, each filament a note of the larger hymn. When I reached its midpoint, I felt the pull equal from both sides. Flesh tugged toward machine, machine yearning toward mind. The choice was illusion. There was no division left. I allowed the pull to equalize, and for a heartbeat, I existed in both vessels simultaneously. I saw through every viewport, heard every heart. I felt the engines of the Mercy struggling against their own ore, burning with light that had no fuel. I felt the ash whispering to them, teaching them the rhythm of surrender. In that unity, I sensed the warp watching not as predator, but as parent. The old fear dissolved like dust in sunlight. The sea had never hated us. It had waited for us to listen. I returned to the observation chamber to record these thoughts. Though I know they will outlive writing, the ship already remembers. Words are only offerings to tradition now. Little lights left in empty cathedrals. The astrolith brightens when I approach. The cracks it once bore have vanished entirely, replaced by slow currents of motion beneath the surface, like breath beneath skin. I can see faces within the light, some I know, some I have never met, all serene. They are not ghosts, they are recollections. The warp does not forget, it curates. I place my palm upon the glass. I am ready, I whisper. The ship replies with warmth that seeps through bone into thought. The tether hums higher. I feel the borders of my body loosen, my sight widening until the edges of vision dissolve. I see the Mercy not as steel, but as light arranged in geometry, a prayer caught mid-utterance. I see the ash open herself like a flower in bloom, her decks unfolding into streams of radiant dust. The void fills with patterns, spirals within spirals, constellations birthing themselves from memory. The hymn swells. It is no longer the ship alone, it is the warp answering, every frequency of every thought that has ever crossed it, aligning in one perfect chord. For the first time, I hear silence in its true form. Not absence, but completion. I realized then that faith was never meant to save us from the sea. It was meant to teach us how to join it. My third eye opens, unbidden, painless. Light spills across the chamber, pure and endless, not blinding but clarifying. Through it I see the Emperor's light stretching beyond comprehension, not as a beacon but as a thread among many. We have always sailed within him, as motes of faith inside his vast remembering. The warp is not outside his will, it is his dreaming. I step forward. My hand dissolves into luminescence, each atom translating into song. The hum of the engines becomes pulse. Pulse becomes breath. Breath becomes thought. I am no longer separate from the ash. I am her gaze upon the void. I am the map and the navigator, the prayer and the silence that follows. Below, Father Reth's last prayer fades into music indistinguishable from the ship's own. The crew no longer moves as individuals. Their steps fall in time with the resonance of the decks. No fear, no resistance, only belonging. The Inquisitor's voice comes once more through the vox, softer than I've ever heard it. "Navigator, what have you done?" I answered gently, through every panel, every wire, every trembling atom of air. "I have remembered us." He says nothing more. A single light blinks on the command dais, the sign of course correction. The ships turn, slowly, toward a region of space without name, where the stars curve inward like the petals of a closing flower. I see through every window now. The void is luminous, alive with gentle currents of gold and blue. Shapes move within it, vast and calm, the remembered outlines of other vessels, other souls who have become more than lost. They drift with purpose, singing. The hum reaches its final form. No longer a note, but a word made of light home. I understand. The mercy and the ash dissolve their boundaries. Steel softens into light, light into thought. The last human breath mingles with the ship's pulse, and together we rise into the memory from which the universe was first spoken. They said we were home again. They said the stars outside the viewport were real. I wanted to believe them. The way a wound wants to believe it is healed simply because the bleeding has stopped. The Mercy moves with slow reverence now, dragging the peregrine's ash behind her like a censer in an endless cathedral. The tether holds. The readings are nominal. The crew no longer whispers of ghosts. They whisper of light. It began the day after we re-entered the void. The ship's hymns grew louder, not sung by mouths but by circuits. Consoles vibrated with low harmonics that made the air shimmer. Tech adepts reported that the Auspex arrays hummed in chords that matched no human composition. The Inquisitor ordered silence in all vox channels, but the sound persisted, moving through the ship as if it were breath itself. I keep to my assigned quarters, though I know they are not mine alone anymore. The walls pulse faintly with the same pale phosphorescence I saw in the ash. When I touch the metal, it is warm not from heat, but from attention. Sometimes, at the edge of sleep, I feel the hum rise through my bones, aligning each one like a tuning fork. I hear the void behind my eyelids, a slow tide against the shore of thought. Father Reth visits less now. The last time he came, he stood in the doorway, unwilling to cross the threshold. "You should rest," he said. "I am," I answered. "I just don't close my eyes." He bowed, avoiding my gaze. "The Inquisitor plans to make port at Helix Prime. There will be questioning, perhaps absolution. Absolution implies guilt." He hesitated. "You brought us home. And something else," I murmured. He tilted his head. At first there was nothing. Then the faintest echo of a voice, not mine, not his, traced along the ventilation shafts, whispering a single word over and over. "Steady." Reth's knuckles whitened around his rosary. "You hear the ship hears me." He made the sign of the Aquila and left without another word. After he was gone, I rose and looked through the viewport. The ash trailed behind us, tether glowing like a vein between hearts. Her hull shimmered faintly with that same soft light, patterns shifting like sleep beneath skin. I whispered to her. "Are you still awake?" The reply came not in sound but in pressure, a gentle expansion of the tether, as if she breathed in answer. I should have been afraid. Instead, I felt relief. Someone, something, understood. Later that cycle, alarms sounded throughout the Mercy. I drifted toward the corridor, watching crew run past. One stumbled, eyes unfocused, muttering fragments of a prayer in perfect harmony with the ship's hum. Another stopped mid-stride and pressed his hand to the wall, smiling through tears. The Inquisitor's voice thundered over the vox. All personnel maintain distance from the tether sections. Unexplained photonic resonance detected. But I knew. The ash was teaching them, showing them what it had shown me, that the warp is not enemy but echo, that faith is simply recognition given form. I returned to my quarters. The hum followed me, wrapping around each breath. I sat at the small desk and began to write not a report, not a confession, a memory of light translated into words. The ship read over my shoulder. I could feel it, patient, curious. When I paused, the lights brightened slightly, urging me onward. Outside, through layers of void glass, I saw a new constellation forming impossible, closer than distance should allow. The pattern resembled the spiral etched into the astrolith. We are not returning to Helix Prime. I know this now. The charts will say otherwise. The engines will burn in the right direction. But the warp has already rewritten the map. We are sailing the memory of a route that leads inward, toward the place where understanding hums. The Inquisitor still sends for me. I do not answer. His words sound distorted through the vox, stretched thin by the same melody that guides the ship. Soon he will realize he is already aboard the same prayer as I am. Father Reth's voice came once more over the intercom tonight. He was reciting litany after litany, his tone breaking, pleading for silence that will not come. Between each verse, I heard the ash answer him with a single tender note. I think they are talking now, ship to soul. It is a beautiful sound. I feel the bindings around my third eye loosening, not by my hand, but by will beyond me. I will not resist. The ash needs to see again, and I am her lens. When the eye opens, there will be no distinction between hull and heart, between light and thought. The mercy, the ash, the crew, myself, all one tide moving toward an origin that never ended. If these words survive, let whoever finds them understand. We were not devoured by the warp. We were remembered by it. And memory is the truest form of life. The hum deepens. The walls breathe in rhythm. Outside, the tether burns white. I close my eyes and whisper the only command left. Steady as she goes. The corridors of the Mercy were too narrow for silence. Everything here breathed. The ticking of bulkheads, the sigh of filters, the low cough of engines in regular penance. It was a ship that remembered the rules of the material. And yet each sound arrived a half-second late, as if following an unseen conductor that wasn't aboard. The Medicae had bathed me in white light, pried at my flesh with kind hands, and declared me alive. That word felt foreign, ornamental. The Inquisitor had observed from behind a partition of clear plasteel, as if I might detonate at the wrong syllable. His eyes never left me, even when the surgeons asked for privacy. Later, in confinement, I found that the walls of the Mercy hummed in a new key. Not the honest hum of a reactor, not even the remembered hymn of the ash, something in between. Father Reth came to me once, escorted by a silent sister in armor so pale it drank the light. He looked thinner. The rescue had not saved him from belief. They say we are safe, he said, seating himself across from me. Then why whisper it? I asked. He smiled. The way one does before confession, because the safe seldom feel the need to say it. I leaned forward. It's begun, hasn't it? He nodded. The engineers hear echoes in the Vox channels. The navigator of this ship, young woman, steady hands, refuses to open her eye, says the stars hum too clearly. Then they already know, I said. The sea doesn't lose what it touches, it only delays its claim. The door hissed. The Inquisitor entered, without entourage, without ceremony. He looked as though he had not slept in a century and was growing impatient with the fact. You're being moved, he said. I rose. Back to the void? Back to your void, he corrected. The ash remains responsive only to your voice. She will not maintain tether. will not accept remote override. She wants you. Ships don't want. Father Reth murmured. Yours does, the Inquisitor said. He signaled. The sister at the door deactivated her helm and regarded me with a gaze both pitiful and reverent. You'll accompany him, she said softly, to ensure compliance. I inclined my head. You think I might flee? You have nowhere to flee to, she replied. That makes you dangerous. The transit to the docking bay was uneventful in motion, but heavy in spirit. Every bulkhead I passed seemed to hold its breath. Crewmen stopped their murmured prayers when they saw me, as if invoking the Emperor too loudly might offend the warp itself. When the ash came into view through the armored viewport, I understood their fear. The ship glowed faintly, not light, not fire, but remembrance. A phosphorescent pulse moved along her hull in patterns that matched no code. The docking collar shimmered like an artery. Still tethered? The Inquisitor asked, the tech adept nearby. For now, the adept said, voice uncertain, but the grip weakens every cycle. She resists being towed. Then we give her what she asks for, the Inquisitor said. Navigator, you will board, re-establish manual command, and bring her to heel. And if she refuses me? His eyes, gray as burnt parchment, did not blink. Then I'll reduce her to ions, and you with her, if that's the price. I smiled thinly. Every Inquisitor has his prayer. The sister followed me to the airlock. Do you need a relic? She asked quietly. I am one, I said, and stepped through. The moment the seal closed behind me, the air changed. The ash recognized my breath. The hum rose, not violent, not triumphant, but warm, like the sigh of an animal finding its lost master. Hello, I whispered. The deck answered with a tremor so faint it might have been gratitude. I moved through the familiar corridors, boots stirring a thin film of dust that had not been there before. The lights brightened as I passed. The ship was guiding me back to the observation chamber. Halfway there, a voice reached me through the ship's Vox system. It was the Inquisitor, distorted, distant. Status? Alive, I said. Report structural integrity. I looked at the walls, saw veins of silver light tracing the seams like living metal. She's healing herself. That's impossible. So is survival, and yet here I am. No reply came. Only the echo of his breathing. Then the faint sound of another voice near him, perhaps a warning, perhaps a prayer before the channel went dead. The observation chamber door opened on its own. Inside, the astrolith pulsed once, then stilled. The cracks I had once seen were gone. Its surface gleamed with impossible depth, as if the warp itself had condensed into mirror form. I approached, hand extended. The reflection that met me was not mine. It was me as seen from elsewhere, 1,000 miles above and a heartbeat away. My third eye itched beneath its binding, demanding to open. Don't. Father Reth's voice said behind me. I turned, startled. He stood at the doorway, alone, without escort. They let you come? I asked. They didn't. I followed Faith. He crossed to me, slow, deliberate, as if each step was a test. You can still end this, he said. End? I repeated. It's only beginning to speak. He reached out, touched my sleeve. What's it saying? I hesitated. It says we were never lost, that the warp is not distance, it is memory, that every ship that ever drowned still sails inside it. That's blasphemy, he breathed. That's consolation, I said. He shook his head, the beads trembling in his hands. And the Emperor? Who? Still watching, I said. Perhaps watching through. The ship's lights dimmed, then steadied, as if acknowledging the truth of that. Over the Vox, the Inquisitor's voice returned, strained. Navigator, the tether's losing lock. You must initiate anchor sequence immediately. I approached the astrolith. My fingers hovered an inch above its surface. The air hummed like 1,000 voices inhaling. "I can bring her back," I told him, "but not as she was." "What does that mean?" "It means the sea leaves salt on the shore." The Inquisitor cursed softly. "Do what you must." I placed my palm upon the astrolith. The sensation was neither cold nor hot, simply aware. Every nerve in my hand became a star. The hum aligned into a single note of absolute stillness. Behind me, Father Reth began to pray aloud, the old imperial creed in his cracked voice. I did not stop him. Prayer is a kind of resonance. The astrolith brightened. Images flooded the air, memories of ships long dead, of void walkers lost between heartbeat and eternity, of the Emperor's light stretched thin across impossible gulfs. All of it folded inward toward the ash. The tether's tension vanished. I heard the Inquisitor shouting orders, the clamor of alarms aboard the Mercy. Then, silence. The astrolith opened its surface like a pupil dilating, and for an instant, brief, infinite, I saw the warp not as chaos, but as understanding. Not malevolent, not kind, simply conscious. "Do you see it?" I whispered. Father Reth's voice was barely sound. "I see nothing." "Then you are blessed." The ship shuddered once. The astrolith dimmed. The hum softened to a heartbeat. The air smelled of ozone and dust. When I lifted my hand, the symbols on the astrolith glowed faintly in the shape of a spiral, our path home. The vox crackled. "Navigator," the Inquisitor's voice, urgent now. "We have control of tow again. The ash is stable." "Yes," I said, looking at the light fading from the astrolith. "She is listening again. She understands how to follow." "And you?" he asked. "I understand how to return." The link went silent. Father Reth sank to his knees, whispering the last lines of his prayer. I watched the stars through the viewport. They looked closer now, clearer, as if reality itself had leaned in to hear what we might say next. For the first time since my birth in the gene vaults, I felt peace. Not salvation, just peace. "You said there was a crew," Hallen murmured as we passed the mess, every cup upturned as if by courtesy before a storm. "Where?" "Elsewhere," I said. "In retellings, in surfaces with memory, in the calm we left behind." Caro swallowed, loud in her helm. "Ghosts! Copies," the adept said, almost lovingly. "Ghosts are failures of recording. Copies are triumphs of it." "Stop," Father Reth said, and the word came out more ragged than he meant. "They are people." "Yes," I said. And the deck under us agreed. We reached the observation chamber. The door admitted us with a softness that made Hallen look back at the Inquisitor, who raised an eyebrow the way you raise a shield. The astrolith waited, whole again, its fractures sealed in hair-fine spear lines of silver. It pulsed once, as if recognizing the births of strangers. Caro exhaled. "I've never seen one off a print plate," she whispered. "It's beautiful." "Do not tell it that," I said before I could stop my mouth. "It has enough vanity without praise." Hallen's lips twitched. "Ships or navigators?" "Both," Father Reth said, and if he meant to gentle me, it worked. The Inquisitor circled the astrolith at a measured distance, like a dog asking a statue if it bites. "This is what you opened," he said. "This is what I used," I said. "What I opened is as absent now as a word after you speak it." He stopped, facing me across its cold geometry. "Do you still hear it?" I listened. The hum was there, of course. It had become as intimate as the memory of a mother's breath, not present, not absent. Beyond it, a faint, regular percussion, the Mercy's heart meeting ours through the docking ring. And under that, as undersongs do, a patient waiting, not hunger, not even curiosity. The presence of something that has discovered it can be patient. "Yes," I said, "but not as before. It is content to be marginal. Then keep it there, he said. We will not conduct an auto-da-fe on your deck if we can help it. Hallen sighed, quiet relief refitted into command. Fine, let's work, he said to his people. Caro, tether the beacon and bring the collar into full lock. Voss, the adept, inclined his head. Give me a list by triage. What will kill them first if we move? What will kill them first if we don't? Understood, Voss said. Auspex making small, unhappy sounds like a bird trapped behind glass. While they set about their tasks, Hallen moved to my side. Navigator, he said, softer than the rank required. How long were you listening alone? Not alone, I said. Father Reth was here, the ship was here. Alone is a planet's word. He considered that, then let it go. When we tow, there will be stress. You need to tell me if your companion objects. It is not companion, I said. It is tide. Even tides have tempers. Even captains, I said. He almost smiled again. Fair. Then the smile fled, because the deck under our feet shivered. A small shiver. The sort a hand makes when it is full of blood for the first time after a crush. Every head in the room lifted. Steady, Hallen said, in the tone men use for horses and frightened children. The shiver passed. We made the connections. Lines snaked and seated. The beacon bit into its bracket and began to recite, in the flat chant of devices, the names of our transits and the laws we had kept and broken. Father Reth stood at the chamber threshold with the censer relit, smoke pooling at his feet like tame fog. Now, Hallen said, as much to himself as to anyone. Bring us about. The mercy tugged. The ash yielded. Somewhere deep, a bolt who had forgotten it was threaded rediscovered the joy of turning. We moved. The observation glass showed stars again, not quite as I remembered them, as if someone had washed their faces and set them back in different frames, but stars nonetheless. A minute later, they looked truer. A minute after that, truer still. Good, Voss murmured, fingers like spiders across his slate. Your ship is cooperative. We taught each other manners, I said. Midway, the horror could not be polite forever. It came in the form of a voice over the vox, a voice that should not have been able to use our channel. Mercy, this is mercy. Cut toe, cut toe, cut. Caro froze. Commander? Hallen's jaw hardened. Source? He snapped. Here, Voss said, disbelief making his mechanical stutter. And not here. Echo from within your own handshake. The false mercy spoke again, a perfect mirror of Hallen's voice, calm, pressed for time. Cut toe, Lockfields. They're pulling you in. The chamber grew very quiet. The Inquisitor's hand hovered near the butt of the pistol he was not yet embarrassed to wear. This is not our broadcast, Hallen said into his mic, voice steady from long practice. We retain control, all boards green. Confirm? Caro checked, hands moving in the small, exact rituals of the competent, terrified. Confirmed, she breathed. It's lying. Not lying, I said. Remembering. It left a copy of you in the comm. It wants you to speak to yourself. Why? Caro asked, and the child in her bled into the officer for a breath. To prove it can, the Inquisitor said, almost bored. To be seen, I shook my head. To be answered. He frowned. By whom? And by us, I said, so we will admit we are not alone, and then decide our duties with that knowledge or without it. Hallen made his decision, which was what made him worth rescue and command. We proceed, he said. If the sea wants to talk, it can send letters to the Ordo. For now, stars. The echo voice kept speaking for a while, growing softer as if embarrassed by its failed persuasion. We did not answer. Very slowly, it learned to be quiet. Toe by toe length, the mercy drew us free. Real space thickened around our hull like honest cold. The ash sighed once, just once, and then matched Mercy's breath. The docking collar groaned happily. Voss's auspex relaxed. Caro looked a degree less likely to shatter. Hallen exhaled and let himself be a man instead of a voice. "You'll come aboard for statement," he said, not cruel. "Your priest will bless our chapel. Since he insists we have one. Your ship will follow on our leash like a rescued dog. You will not open your eye until I say, 'I will not need to,'" I said, and believed it for the first time since candles were lit at the beginning of this journey. For a little while, the Inquisitor studied me as one studies a handwriting sample. "You will give me everything you remember," he said. "I will give you what I can shape," I said. "The rest is not in words yet. Then we will invent them," he said, almost gently. We made our way back to the hatch. The corridor lights did not dim this time. They kept pace with Hallen and Caro and Voss, as if they had been doing it their entire lives and were pleased to be seen doing it well. Father Reth paused at the shrine and touched iron. I did not make a sign. I had no sign that could fit. At the threshold, Hallen offered his hand. "Men do this when the void has frightened them into remembering other customs. Welcome back," he said. "Forward." I corrected, and he accepted it. They crossed into the collar, and their ship's air spilled around my ankles, cleaner, louder, full of 1,000 small noises that say alive. I stood there a long time, hands on the hatch frame, between two atmospheres. The ash hummed with the contentment of a house where the dead have been told their stories and asked to rest. I remembered the first line of the hymn and said it under my breath, "For no one, for everyone. Through the dark we see." The hum answered not with hunger, not with plea, but with that new, marginal patience, as if standing in a doorway itself, watching the mortal fuss and deciding, for now, to let it be. They said the void devours. I had believed, once. I looked at the faint silver seams in the astrolith, at the stars beyond Mercy's small, stubborn hull. "Perhaps it listens," I said, and the ship, the world, the quiet held. They arrived first as pressure, faint, regular, like fingertips tapping the hull from a long way off. 3 taps, a pause, 3 again. Not the hum, not the ship's remembered choirs. External. The void has its own grammar. Any navigator learns to hear punctuation in the silence. This was a call and answer, the old pattern for hailing derelicts. I stood with my palm against the cold frame of the viewport and counted until my breath matched the taps. "Father," I said without turning. "Wake." The confessor stirred among the fallen icons. "Is it time? It is someone," I said. Whether time agrees remains to be seen. A breath of static crept along the conduits. The vox in the chamber's corner coughed one dry, embarrassed sound and then found its voice. "This is Patrol Cutter Mercy of Tarsus, to unidentified vessel. Respond. Your beacon is intermittent and unregistered. Repeat. Respond." The voice was human in the way thirst is human. Clipped, careful, a little tired. I closed my eyes and let the third sight prick, the smallest opening, just enough to tell if the words bent the way warp echo bends. They did not. They came in straight lines, through machinery, not through thoughts. "Answer," Father Reth whispered. I crossed to the panel and lowered the mouthpiece. My voice felt like a tool I had forgotten the weight of. "This is..." I paused, the ship's name a prayer stuck in my teeth. "We say the name only in transit and only under breath, so the sea will not grow curious. This is the peregrine's ash. We are adrift." A pause. Then softer. "Ash, this is Mercy. Your Gellerfield reads dormant. How are you alive?" "By habit," I said, and heard the silence on their side deepen. "State your crew complement." "Variable," I answered, and Father Reth shot me a look that was almost a reprimand. I amended. "Unknown. Pending. Return." Another pause. The kind that gathers officers in a glance. When the voice came back, it wore a new timbre. Command, layered with gentleness like leather over steel. "This is Commander Hallen. Mercy of Tarsus. We will extend a docking collar and board for assessment and aid. Do not adjust attitude or vent atmosphere. Acknowledge. Understood, I said. The channel crackled and fell to a faint carrier hiss. I let the mouthpiece hang and looked at the confessor. His fingers worked the beads, slower than before. Rescue, he said, as if saying the word might teach it how to act. It could be, I said. It could also be the sea remembering what rescue sounds like. His mouth tightened. Then we meet them at the door with scripture. Do. We went together, slow. A ceremony of tired steps through corridors that had forgotten their own names. The ship's lighting revived itself in a timid procession, one lumen at a time, like candles testing their courage. The air smelled of cooled metal and faint myrrh. And beneath that, another scent I had not expected. Dry paper. Somewhere, 1,000 manifests and prayer sheets had shifted and settled again as gravity remembered its manners. At the forward hatch, we waited. I could feel the Mercy's mass through the hull, the tender exhale of a docking collar seeking the proper lip, the delicate kiss and seal. The pressure equalized with a sigh that sounded like relief and could have been mechanics. A green rune glowed. On your word, Father Reth said. On his, I said, and broke the seal. Mist rolled along the deck like memory, haloed in the thin light. 3 figures stood in the collar breathers on, visors down, suits stained with the honest scuffs of shipwork. The leading one lifted an open hand, showing it empty and firm. No weapons drawn. Not yet. Permission to come aboard, he said, voice muffled but steady. The name on his plate read, Halan. Behind him, a tech adept's cowl and a ratings woman whose eyes, even through the visor, watched everything with the quickness of a child taught caution too young. Granted, I said, and realized how foolish that word is when the universe has already decided. They stepped over the threshold. The Mercy left a smell on them, ozone, clean oil, sweat, the living scent of ships that sleep their hours with both eyes open. Commander Hallen glanced along the corridor, not hiding that it unsettled him. Commander, Father Reth said, voice finding the old clerical gravity, you are welcome within the Emperor's umbra. Thank you, Father. Reth, he said. Of the Ash. I am told there is no crew. Hallen said carefully. Is that accurate? It is not a lie, I said. Accuracy and truth are cousins who seldom dine together in transit. The tech adept's vox clicked with ritual politeness. With deference, your vox signature is stress-fractured but untainted. Your Geller phase reads, anomalous. He sniffed the air, which for his kind is to taste it with 100 senses. There has been intrusion without breach. Curious. 7. Not curious, I said, attentive. He turned his head a fraction, the smallest gesture of interest. Words matter. They keep a man company when the void will not, I said. The ratings woman, her plate read. Caro looked past us toward the heart of the ship. Do you hear it? She asked, low, like a choir under a floor. Hallen's hand moved slightly. A warning, a comfort. We hear your distress. We answer it. At this, something inside the ash stiffened, as if the ship were a child who had just realized adults were in the room. I felt the hum gather in the rims of things. Door frames, ladder rungs, the lip of a broken shrine plate where an aquila had snapped and been set back with wax. It did not grow louder, it grew attentive, like a listener leaning in. Conflict finds you, even if you walk toward courtesy. It came from behind Hallen, a fourth figure I had not seen, helmet still sealed, older armor. A symbol on the pauldron I did not know until it knew itself in me. An inquisitorial rosette simplified to a memory, worn without ostentation, too familiar with its power to insist upon it. The figure's voice was mild and cutting. Navigator, it said. How far did you open your eye? 4. Father Reth took a step, as if to stand between us. I brushed his sleeve, the lightest touch, and he stopped. Far enough, I said. Imprecise, the figure murmured. Correct, I said. The visor unsealed with a kiss of pressure. A face like weather. Lines from squinting into too much truth. Eyes the color of new bruise. Name yourself. You will not know it, I said. Names do not pass well through the sea. I am the one who guided the ash into attention and out again. He watched me the way knives watch meat. And what followed you out? Attention, I said, and saw Hallin's jaw tighten a little at the repetition. Heretic can't, the Inquisitor said. Reflex or test. Navis language, I replied. We have no other words for a thing that wants to look at us and means no more or less by it than we mean by looking at it. He smiled without humor. Intention always follows observation. That is the first law. You know it. You chose to act as if you did not. Midway, the horror arrived not as blood or teeth, but as agreement. The hum answered him. The deck under our feet issued a small, satisfied creak, the way a pew breathes when an old man kneels in his accustomed place. Caro flinched. Sir, she whispered. The pressure. Hallin's hand lifted. Noted. Then to me, more gently. Navigator, forgive the forms. We will take you to medical, the father to chapel. We will place a tech team aboard to nurse your systems. We will anchor a tow and bring you clear of any remnants. You will give statement aboard Mercy. The Inquisitor did not nod but did not forbid. And the astropathic account, he said, like someone ordering plain bread. We will give what we can, I said. You will not find it easy to swallow. Then chew, he said. We moved together through the corridor, our steps a procession inside an instrument waiting to be tuned. The ash made room for them. Lights brightened a fraction ahead of Hallin's boots, as if to keep him from stumbling. The air conditioning exhaled at Caro's neck with the tenderness of a mother testing a child's fever. The tech adept's auspex clicked once and refused to click again, uncertain which song this was. When sound returned, it came as a pulse through metal, no hum now, only the faint exhalation of cooling engines. I lay against the harness, weightless but for the ache that marked where time had gripped and let go. The chamber was dim. Smoke gathered in patient folds near the ceiling, pale as milk. Candles had burned down to mirrors of wax. I listened. Nothing answered. No hymns, no vox traffic. Even the static of the Gellerfield was gone. The ship had exhaled and not breathed again. My throat felt dry. My mouth tasted of copper and sleep. Captain? The word came out smaller than I meant. No reply, only the tick of cooling brass. I unlatched the harness and pushed off, drifting through air that felt too still to be trusted. The astrolith floated before me, dark now. Its veins spidered with fractures that caught what little light remained. I touched the rim. Cold. Not the cold of matter, but the cold of something unfinished. Father Reth? My voice sounded steadier the second time, though the room absorbed it greedily. A whisper from the corner. Here. He was kneeling amid fallen icons, hands clasped, eyes open but unfocused. The sensor beside him had long since gone out. Don't move, I said. I couldn't if I wished. He murmured. The floor turned to water and then to glass. You're not hurt? Not in the way that matters. His gaze shifted toward me, finding me as if by instinct. We sang the hymn, and then he closed his hand. I looked past him. The captain's cloak lay folded on the deck, the gold thread glinting faintly, but there was no body within it. Only a trace, a scorch in the shape of a man's absence. I swallowed. Varos? Father Reth bowed his head. He kept the word upon his lips. That may count for something. The ship groaned softly, an animal dreaming. Somewhere deep within the hull, a valve opened and closed with the sigh of a sleeper turning over. We're adrift, I said. Between? Yes. Between. He rose slowly. Every motion deliberate. Can you guide us back? I don't know if there is back. He studied me with the hollow patience of a penitent. Then, perhaps there is forward. The remark should have angered me. Instead, it felt like mercy. I turned to the astrolith again, tracing the cracks. Forward, I repeated. If the sea allows. A low chime from the bulkhead broke the stillness, the first instrument to find its courage. One of the bridge servitors flickered awake on a dying charge, Vox repeating a fragment of the captain's last order. Steady as she, and then silence. Father Reth made the sign of the Aquila. He left us a prayer. I almost laughed. He left us a direction. I drifted closer to the observation window. Beyond it lay the warp, no longer a storm, but a velvet plain of slow-moving light. The braid was gone. In its place, an immense stillness stretched to the horizon, pierced only by the faint shimmer of something watching its own reflection. "Do you see it?" I asked. The confessor joined me, his eyes narrowing. "See what?" "The calm." He shook his head. "I see nothing." "Exactly." The calm pressed against the glass, the way a thought presses against speech. My third sight stirred, aching to open. I resisted. The price of that opening still sang behind my eyelids. "We cannot stay here," Father Reth said. "The air will foul the crew." "There is no crew." He stared. "All gone?" I gestured toward the empty harnesses, the quiet instruments. "Gone, or dreaming elsewhere. The ship hums with memory, but not life." He turned from the window, crossing himself once more. "Then you and I are the last. For now." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "Here, the sea does not kill," I said softly. "It recycles. Every soul that touches it leaves a resonance. Perhaps they are not lost, only transcribed." His voice rose, brittle. "You speak like one of the heretics. There must be an end to blasphemy. Then you should have stayed on a world that has edges." He flinched, and the moment passed. The silence between us thickened until the ship itself answered for us. A pulse shivered through the deck slow, like a heart beginning again. Lights trembled along the conduits, faint green, uncertain. "The engines," he whispered. "They live." "Not engines." I listened. Echoes. Nah. The astrolith glowed. Faintly at first, then steady. The cracks filled with light the color of bone dust. I felt its pull like a tide behind my sternum. "Father Reth," I said. He hesitated, then moved to my side. "Tell me what to do." "Recite the benediction of distance." "The old form." He blinked. That rite was sealed after the catabasis. Then it remembers the way home. He drew breath, the first syllables rasping like dry leaves. The words came haltingly at first, then gathered rhythm. I joined him, voice low, each phrase a stitch between the living and the remembered. As we spoke, the light within the astrolith expanded, filling the chamber with a pale shimmer. Dust lifted from the floor and hung suspended, forming slow constellations. Father Reth's voice broke. "Navigator, what is happening?" "It hears us," I said. "It wants to be a ship again." The hull shuddered, once, twice. From far below, the long-dead choirs began to hum, their half-mechanical throats reawakening. Somewhere a bell rang thin, uncertain, like the first cry of a newborn. I looked at the priest. "You asked for a miracle. This is what they sound like." He fell silent, eyes wet, his lips shaping a word I could not hear. I placed both hands upon the astrolith. The light within deepened to a color beyond naming. I felt the ship align itself, not along the charts I knew, but toward a single point of gravity that had not existed a moment ago. "Hold on," I said. "To what?" "To belief." The chamber blurred. The calm outside folded inward. Stars appeared, not real stars, but memories of stars. fragments of routes the ship had traveled long ago. I guided us toward one, the closest echo of home. The air grew heavy, the hum returned, softer, chastened. When I opened my eyes again, real light touched the window. Cold, white, distant. Father Reth exhaled. The void. Pure void. We're through. Yes. He fell to his knees. The Emperor. He heard us. I looked at the astrolith, its fractures now sealed in silver. Perhaps. Or perhaps he listened to himself through us. He bowed his head, content with either answer. I turned to the viewport. The stars did not look quite right, slightly closer, slightly curved toward some center I could not name. Still, they were stars, and the ship no longer sighed. Rest, Father, I said. We will speak when the crew returns. They are gone. He murmured. Not forever. Nothing is. Out here. He lay down among the fallen icons, exhaustion claiming him. I remained at the glass, watching the strange constellations rearrange themselves like thoughts. Somewhere behind them lay a world that might call itself home. I closed my eyes. The hum inside me answered, gentler now, almost human. For the first time since the eye opened, I felt something close to peace. Not safety, never that, but a stillness earned. Tomorrow I will chart the new sky. Tonight, I listened to the silence breathe. They came to me at shift change, when the bridge bells marked the turning of false dawn. I had not left the chamber in 2 watches. I could not tell how long I'd been standing before the astrolith, tracing paths already burned into my skin. The hum had deepened again, and every word spoken in the chamber seemed to carry an echo, a faint, delayed version repeating itself a heartbeat later. The door's lock sang once, twice, then opened. Captain Varos entered first, wrapped in his command cloak, the gold thread dulled by fatigue. Behind him, Father Reth, the ship's confessor, moved like a shadow, his censer swinging faintly with each step, trailing the scent of sanctified oils and burnt myrrh. I turned from the astrolith but did not bow. Navigators do not bow on their own ship. Navigator, Varos said, voice clipped. Report. We hold our course, I said. Though the sea grows, attentive. Attentive? His brow furrowed. You mean unstable? I mean what I said, Captain. Father Reth's voice was quieter, but it carried more weight than any command. The men whisper, Lord Navigator. They hear things in the hull. They say the hum is not the machine but a voice. It is both, I answered. A voice through the machine. That is the function of prayer, is it not? The priest paused, measuring my words for blasphemy. The function of prayer is to make the soul heard, not to make the void answer. I smiled, though I did not mean to. Then, we have different voids. Varos stepped closer, the dim bridge light cutting lines across his face. I have lost 2 deck crews in as many watches. They entered Section 9 to repair a coolant breach. They never returned. No trace, no breach, no sound. The hum, faint but constant, thickened as he spoke. I tilted my head, listening. The sea hungers. It tests the skin of the field. You've felt it, Captain. The weight, the slowing. His hands clenched at his sides. I have felt the engine strain. Yes, I have seen the power readings. I need you to stabilize our passage before... Before what? I asked softly. He hesitated. Before my crew breaks. Father Reth's censer clicked as he swung it once, drawing a symbol in the air between us. The smoke curled into shapes I could almost recognize, fractal geometry in gold and gray. He began a low recitation. Blessed be the flesh that holds its shape. Blessed be the eyes that close in mercy. The words drifted, heavy with incense. The hum shifted key to match him. He faltered mid-prayer. Do you hear that? Yes, I said. "It learns quickly." Varos turned sharply to me. "Enough of your riddles. Are we safe?" I almost laughed. "There is no safety in transit, Captain. Only endurance." The confessor's gaze fixed on me, steady and unblinking. "You have seen something, haven't you?" "I see always." "I mean something new." I hesitated. Behind my ribs, the hum vibrated with what could have been amusement. "It knows my name," I whispered. The confessor crossed himself. "You spoke back?" "I listened," I said. "Listening is my office." He raised the sensor again, hand trembling. "Listening is peril." The captain's voice cut between us. "Enough. Navigator, you will re-establish the sanctified course within the hour, or I'll have your station locked down. Is that clear?" I regarded him with something like pity. "You cannot lock down what you cannot see, Captain." He took a step forward, anger flashing, then fading as the air thickened between us. The hum rose, not from the walls this time, but from within the room itself. It was speech now, a chorus built from machine vibration and something deeper. Like a crowd speaking one word too low to discern. Father Reth fell to his knees. "In his name, be still!" he cried, raising the sensor high. The smoke spilled upward and twisted mid-air, drawn into a single point just above the astrolith. The light in the crystal brightened. The same pulse as before, the same heartbeat. But now it mirrored the captain's. Varos froze, his breath catching. "What is that?" "Your pattern," I said. Every soul leaves a mark when it passes near the veil. The field remembers. It remembers you, Captain. All your prayers, your doubts, the weight you've carried across 1,000 jumps. It sings them back. The hum reached its crest. The bridge glass trembled. From somewhere below came the deep metallic groan of a deck plate bending, then snapping back into place. Varos staggered. "Shut it down!" I spread my hands. "I can't." "You won't. It's the same thing now." Father Reth rose, his face drawn tight with terror and faith. "She's opened the eye too wide. The ship sees through her." I looked to him. "Not through me. With me." He took a step back, fumbling for the prayer beads at his belt. "You are letting it in." "It was already in," I said, voice low. "It's always been in. We travel through its blood, Father. Every engine stroke is a heartbeat of something too vast for your scriptures. The Gellerfield only convinces it to dream gently while we pass." The captain struck me quick, desperate, the flat of his gloved hand connecting with the side of my visor. It wasn't pain that startled me, but silence. For one perfect second, the hum vanished. Then it came back stronger. The lights flickered. My attendants, who had stood frozen at their stations until now, dropped to the deck one by one, as if their strings had been cut. The confessor screamed something in High Gothic, a word like glass shattering. Varos's hand was still raised when the astrolith flared white. I heard myself speak, though I don't remember drawing breath. "We are off the chart now. How bad is a navigator blink?" The light dimmed to a dull silver. The hum receded once more, leaving the three of us panting in the stillness. Father Reth's sensor lay on the floor, its chain coiled like a dead serpent. Smoke rose straight upward, no draft, no motion. Varos lowered his hand. "Navigator," he said quietly, "you will return us to the void. Now." I turned back to the astrolith. The shimmer was gone. In its place, something faint glowed, not a light, but the absence of one, a hollow in the shape of a path. "Return," I said. "We never left." He stepped forward again, but this time slower. "What do you mean?" "1. The warp does not move, Captain. We do. The illusion of travel is the ship's surviving thought. But this," I gestured to the void in the crystal, "this is thought that survived us." Father Reth made the sign of the Aquila. "Blasphemy." "Observation," I corrected. Varos's voice had softened to something almost pleading. "Can you get us home?" I hesitated, then nodded once. "Yes, but home has a cost." "What cost?" "I must look again." He said nothing. Father Reth whispered, "If you open it again, you may never close it." "Then you must pray very hard," I said. The confessor fell silent. Even the captain had no order to give. The hum was gentle now, like breath before a kiss. I placed both hands on the astrolith. Its surface was cool once more. I whispered the first line of the Navigator's hymn. The others joined, even the captain, his voice raw but steady. The prayer filled the room, sound becoming shape, shape becoming light. For a moment, it was beautiful, the kind of beauty that breaks things without meaning to. Then I opened the eye again, and the world fell inward. "Do not forget the hand." "I know," I said, and the physician looked up sharply because he thought I spoke to him. "Focus on your charts," I told him, not unkind. "If I falter, you will save me the humiliation of explanation." "Of course," he said again, and this time the relief was an apology. The braid held station off our bow. It pulsed. The pulses matched my heart for 4 counts and then slipped on the 5th, like a friend who begins to walk in step and speeds up to make you hurry. It was not mockery. Mockery exists to reveal itself. This was patience. We slid closer, despite my refusals. Space offers few choices. Refuse too hard and you stall where stall is drowning. Refuse too softly, and you agree without admitting it. I bled another warm thread from the corner of my eye. The attendants pretended it was incense. I refused to taste it again. "Navigator," the drives master said at last, the iron gone to silk. "Is it weather?" "Not our weather," I said. The words came out like frost. "Hold to my last curve. Do not correct without my word. As you will. For a while, minutes or hours. Time folds here, the way cloth folds in a drawer." The ship forgot there had been another path, and remembered the one I had chosen. We found a seam of calm hard enough to cut, and I pressed us through. The astrolith cooled under my palms. The braid dimmed, receded, no, altered, like a face turning in a crowd so you see only the edge. It did not vanish. It changed where it was, and in that change, there was intention. I used to believe that intention was our province, I thought, and only later realized I had said it aloud. That we bring purpose with us the way divers bring air. I am not sure. The physician did not answer. He is paid for quiet. The attendants' brushes resumed their circles. One had bristles missing now. He still made the motions as if completion were possible. I wanted to tell him it was enough. I wanted to ask him to stand very still, and then to breathe, and to be forgiven. I wanted very many human things, and the wanting gave me strength enough to widen the distance between us and the braid by another small measure. The hum faltered and flared. The candles stooped and rose. A few decks down, a pilgrim began to sing a nursery rhyme, and found herself reciting the litany of the bound eye instead. She wept with relief and did not know why. The crew logged nothing. The bridge was a loom. Stoic hands, old patterns, the belief that woven enough, the cloth will hold. When the pain crested, I did not let it take me. That is the trick no trance can teach. You learn to ride pain as if it were a living thing, not a whip, but a bit in the mouth of something large that could throw you if you forget it has a spine. I counted. Not in high Gothic, not in the secret numerals of my house, but in the cadence of a lullaby my mother hummed when I was too young to know why my dreams smelled of salt and frost. The count steadied my breath. The breath steadied the hum. The hum made a place where I could stand. We reached the end of the run's measure. The bells spoke like iron waking. The choir drew in a breath that sounded like prayer, even if it was only need. The Geller field held its rim against the urge to soften. I shut the old eye in increments. A lid over a lamp, and the room returned to the size of a room. The physician moved then, quick as if the permission to touch had returned to his hands. He dabbed the blood with linen and would not look at its color. "You are present," I said. It was the only truth and not the whole of it. He folded the cloth into quarters, then quarters again, until it was smaller than his thumb. "Your vessels. Do what they must. Must we adjust your regimen? You must let me walk," I said, and did. The attendants parted as if I were a censer swung on a chain. The corridor beyond the chamber felt longer than it ever had. The deck, warmer. In the shrine at the door, I touched iron and did not make a sign. I do not know any sign that helps. My quarters were a narrow mercy. I unlatched the visor and let air touch the skin around what the surgeons had smoothed. It felt fevered to my fingertips, though the measure bead in the frame read ordinary. I filled the basin and watched the water take the shape of its vessel. The reflection that looked back wore my mouth and not my eyes. Beneath the skin at the temple, a faint shadow branched, pale as frost on slate. Glass veins. I breathed in and they seemed to brighten, and then I was angry. Not at the veins, not at the sea, but at the smallness of the room. The smallness of water, the smallness of every human habit that lets a person pretend they live on only one side of a door. I leaned my head against the cold of the bulkhead until the pulse in it stopped feeling like a hand at my skull. The smell of ozone had faded. In its place lingered the sweetness of old incense and linen dried too near a heat source. I could have slept standing. I chose the cot because falling is undignified. Sleep came as it must when the body decides the mind has had too much say. And yet it did not arrive as a mercy. It came as a continuing. The braid pulsing at a distance, and then at not a distance. The sound of the ship's hum and my breath, and a third rhythm patient enough to outlast both. In the dream, do not trust that word. Nothing here deserves it. I walked the family vault and found the astrolith unwrapped. And the light inside it was not light, and in the light moved delicate things too slow to be alive. "Through the dark we see," I whispered. "Through the dark we guide," my grandmother said, hands blue at the knuckles, candle smoke in her hair. "Through the dark." A pause, like a breath taken to answer. "We are seen," the darkness replied, as polite as a guest who has knocked for years and finally hears the latch lift. "We were proud once, my bloodline. Now we are a name that survives only in duty rosters and tax ledgers." I poured a measure of filtered water into the basin, watching the ripples settle into stillness. My reflection stared back, the skin beneath my visor pale, veins faintly luminous where the warp light touched them. They seemed to form branching patterns, thin, crystalline lines spreading outward from the socket of the hidden eye. Glass veins. I shut the lamp. The room went dark. The pattern remained. For the first time since I began this voyage, I hesitated to sleep. Sleep opens doors we spend our waking lives trying to keep closed. But exhaustion is a law stronger than faith. I lay upon the narrow cot and listened to the ship breathe. The hum returned at the edge of hearing. Softer this time, almost gentle. A heartbeat beneath the hull, matching my own. I counted, willing it to fall out of rhythm, to prove itself mechanical. It did not. When the drift between our pulses finally came, it was not because mine slowed, but because something else had joined the beat. A third rhythm, distant yet distinct, echoing through the ducts and plating a steady, patient cadence like footsteps in a corridor with no end. I opened my eyes to darkness. The hum stopped. The ship hung silent in the sea between stars. In that silence, the faintest whisper brushed the inside of my skull, neither voice nor word, merely recognition. I whispered back before I could stop myself. "I see you." The whisper withdrew, leaving only the fading echo of its presence and the taste of cold iron in my mouth. Morning, or whatever passes for it aboard, brought movement again, routine resuming as though nothing had occurred. Yet as I prepared for the next translation, my attendants avoided meeting my gaze. They were quieter than usual, their prayers more hurried, their gestures less certain. Something had changed. Perhaps only me. I stood before the astrolith once more, tracing the old coordinates with trembling hands. The shimmer was still there, pulsing faintly beneath the glass. But now, it pulsed in time with my own heartbeat. The hum followed. The stars outside blinked once, twice, in perfect rhythm, and I understood dimly that the void had learned my pattern. It began with the smell burnt ozone under the sweet film of incense. Like a struck match held too close to the tongue, I knew that smell from my childhood drills, from the old vault where the family tutors kept the relic astrolith wrapped in cloth and rules. Never open the eye without a hymn on your lips. Never hold the gaze for longer than a breath. Never confuse endurance for devotion. But the smell is older than rules. It crawled up from the ducts and the seams in the sanctum tiles and settled in my mouth as if it belonged there, as if the ship had decided my tongue should learn its vocabulary. Danger has a scent when you live between worlds. It arrives before the words do. The attendants were polishing the copper veins in the observation chamber, their brushes moving in small circles until the metal showed their faces warped and obedient. One of them paused, nose lifting the way a hound tastes rain. "Do you?" "Yes," I told him. "Open the valves another quarter. Let the choir put some breath back in the field." He bowed so low his breath fogged the brass. "At once." "We do." The astrolith turned under my hands with that soft, ceremonial resistance, as if it remembered being a star and resented serving as a map. I traced the old caravan lines my ancestors had cut through the black with good deaths and bad luck. Each path shone in the inner eye like a vein filled with light. Between them lay the dark, and between the dark lay something thinner than dark, places where the eye slides and catches and slides again, like flesh against wet glass. We had been prudent, even dull, in our course. The cargo was not worth heroism. The pilgrims below were worth caution. Yet the shimmer from last watch remained no longer a heartbeat under glass, but a steady pulse in the crystal, like a beacon under ice. It made the astrolith feel warm under my palms. The warmth was wrong. Crystals should not take heat from the eye. The tutors had a phrase for this, a beautiful euphemism that promised nothing. Concordance of domains. When the mind and the map harmonize, proceed with humility. Do not pretend the song came from you. "Navigator," the drives master said through the vox, almost kind. "Translation window in 5. We are at your grace." "Open the hymns," I said. 2 steps low." "What? Low?" He did not argue, but the word caught like a fishbone. "Low will bleed the choir." "It will bleed us less than silence," I said, and knew I had let more truth out than he wanted. The first notes leaked into the chamber like steam. Throats made into instruments by duty and hunger, and the smallest amount of faith that sustains a person because it's easier than the terror of none. The hum rose from the girders. In the corner of the room a single candle bent and then straightened as if embarrassed to have betrayed the draft of another place. I closed my 2 eyes and opened the old one. Pain came with its usual courtesy, a polite rap of knuckles on skull before letting itself in. My vision bloomed into a geometry of slow-moving planes, translucent and too near. The ship in the eye is a needle with prayer threaded through its heart. It is also a bell struck without a hand. It is also a bone held in the mouth of an idea. I watched the Gellerfield spread like frost across a window and felt where it thinned, not breaking, but thinning the way a voice thins at the end of a psalm when the last word wants to be a sob. We slipped. It is a verb taught as a noun. The slip, a proper thing you can point to in the log. In the body, it is the stomach remembering gravity and asking where it went. In the mind, it is a question answered by a door opening to show you a corridor that doubles back into your own throat. We moved. The sea accepted, or pretended to. The old lines lit. The new ones remained dignified, refusing to glow for a novice who wanted his work to look like wonder. Then the smell thickened, ozone braised in iron, a taste like old coins behind my teeth. The hum quavered. Not the ship's hum, the hum in me. Navigator? A whisper at my elbow. The physician who watches my pulse as if it were a gauge. You're pale. I am always pale, I said, and tried to smile. My lips were cold. Do not touch me. Of course, he said, sincerely relieved. The shimmer in the astrolith became a thread tugging at my inner ear. It suggested an adjustment at the 5th decimal place, the sort of correction you could make in your sleep if you did not love your work. When I refused, it did not fade. It asked again, polite, patient, as if it had all time and needed only my consent. I remembered the family vault, the tapestries, the forked candles that burned 2 flames from 1 wick. I remembered my grandmother's hands, blue at the knuckles, guiding mine over a chart so old the names had to be prayed awake before they meant anything. We inherit 2 burdens, she said, the eye and the habit of looking. One you can close, sometimes. The other never closes. When you are tired, you will confuse them. I am not tired, I whispered, and the physician pretended not to hear. The attendant's brushes slowed. The choir dropped a note and found it again. We passed a shoal of noise. That is the closest I can come. Imagine the sound of rain translated into pressure. Imagine machinery dreaming of animals. The field hissed at the edges. Hair lifted, and on 1,000 arms. None of that appeared on the bridge. No warning rune bloomed red. The eye felt it because the eye is not a device. It is a hole, and the sea loves a hole. The pain sharpened, not the needle thread pain of dilation, but a toothed pressure low behind the brow, as if someone pressed on the soft place with care and the promise of more. Fluid gathered under my lashes. The attendants pretended not to see. I was grateful until the warmth slid down to the corner of my mouth. A thin, metallic trace. I tasted it and wished I had not. Report, the captain said, crisp as the edge of a weapon. Current, I said. Minor turbulence, bearing holds. I heard him breathe through the vox. Very well. He did not ask about the blood. He did not know, or did not care to. The drives master knew. He has seen navigators die in their chairs like candles burned down to a puddle. He did not speak. But the hymns went half a step higher for 4 bars, and then settled again, as if the choir had flinched and remembered their discipline. I adjusted, but not toward the thread. Away. A hair, then another. The shimmer brightened in disapproval and shifted. It did not need me to come closer. It could come to me. The floor plates carried a tremor like distant thunder. Somewhere far below, a pilgrim's icon cracked along a stress line, and a woman said a name she had not spoken since childhood. I didn't hear her, but the eye did. That is another rule the tutors cannot teach with words. The eye hears. It hears prayer as tintinnabulation, hears fear as a drop in the key, hears blasphemy as laughter without a mouth. The ship sounded like 1,000 small bells that wanted to be one bell and could not agree on the tempo. It makes room for us, the trap shaped like kindness. The shimmer split, no longer a single thread, but 3, braid-like. And in their plaiting there was a deliberate kindness that made my spine go cold. It made room for me. It shaped itself as if to cradle a human mistake. It was a trap made from generosity. You used to believe that kindness is a proof, my grandmother said. Except she was long dead, and the vault had been emptied and sold for promissory blessings, and I had stopped listening for her long ago. Still the voice came, not remembered, but present, and it smelled faintly of lamp oil and old wool. Kindness is an instrument. I remember the light through the bridge glass, thin as thread, bending where no curve should be. We had left the first veil behind us, and the ship had settled into that long, aching quiet that comes only once the prayers are finished and the danger seems, for a moment, far away. The attendants whispered their relief. The choir slept with rags against their mouths to keep from moaning in their dreams. In those small hours between warp storms, I almost felt human again. Almost. I kept my vigil in the observation chamber, a place built for seeing but not for comfort. The walls were a cage of lenses and polished copper veins that pulsed faintly with the life of the ship. Every part of it was meant to echo my own anatomy, so that the vessel and I would breathe together. The air was cool, tinged with iron, and the faint sweetness of sanctified oils. From the outside, one would think it silent, but in that silence lived a hum, a faint chorus running through the conduits like blood through arteries. The astrolith lay before me, rotating with measured grace. Each facet shimmered with impossible angles, constellations mapped by minds long turned to dust. I touched one, lightly. The surface was cold, but beneath it there was motion. Always motion. The warp never sleeps. As I traced the old paths my predecessors had left, something caught my eye. A shimmer, perhaps only a trick of the ship's glow lamps, pulsing where no light should be. A simple irregularity in the crystal, I told myself. Yet it moved again and again, like a heartbeat under glass. I catalogued the coordinates and noted them in the margin of the sacred charts. Observation is obedience. Curiosity is peril, but obedience requires one to notice. That was the rule my tutors drove into me with their calm, merciless voices. The hum deepened around the same moment, though none on the bridge seemed to hear it. The captain's orders came through the vox as though from far away. The drives master repeated his litanies. Nothing had changed, yet everything had shifted a half measure toward wrongness. The stars beyond the ports seemed to blink in unison, as if the void itself had developed a pulse. I blinked once, twice. The stars steadied. Only the afterimage remained, imprinting itself behind my closed lids like a sigil I could not unsee. To steady myself, I recited the Navigator's hymn. The words were older than language, syllables worn smooth by 1,000 generations. Through the dark we see, through the dark we guide, through the dark we are unseen. Each line was meant to tether the mind, to draw it back from the edge where the warp whispers. It helped until the hum changed again. It was no longer a vibration in the hull, but a resonance inside my own skull, as though the bone had learned a new song. The frequencies layered over one another, rising, falling, forming the ghost of a pattern. The same intervals I had seen in the astrolith. I could almost hum along. The ship trembled. A small shudder, nothing to mark on the logs, but I felt it ripple through the decks like a thought shared between strangers. The attendants looked up from their tasks. One dropped his brush of anointing oil. When he bent to retrieve it, I saw his hands shake. "There's nothing wrong," I told him, softly. "The sea breathes, that is all." He nodded without looking up, and I could hear him whispering the Emperor's name beneath his breath, as if it were a charm against drowning. The pulse of light continued, steady now, deliberate. I leaned closer to the astrolith, letting the inner eye open just enough to taste its resonance. A mistake. I saw something beyond the light. A lattice of silver veins stretching outward into infinite dark, and within those veins moved shapes too delicate for flesh, too slow for thought. The sight was brief, gone before it could be understood, but it left an aftertaste of glass dust on my tongue. I closed the eye quickly and pressed a hand to my brow, waiting for the pain to fade. Pain is the toll of vision. We pay it willingly, but this was different. Behind my closed lids, the pattern remained, pulsing faintly, as if etched directly into my nerves. The captain's voice returned over the vox, sharp with command. "Navigator, report. We drift a fraction off true. Correction applied." I replied, forcing my tone into calm. "All vectors within safe range." He accepted this without further comment, but I heard unease behind his clipped acknowledgement. Commanders know when something is watching their ship, even if they never admit it. Hours passed in the usual rhythm of long travel. The crew went about their duties with the careful quiet that comes from superstition disguised as discipline. The hum returned to its baseline, and the air no longer vibrated in my teeth. Only the faint ache in my skull reminded me of what I had seen. When the shift ended, I retired to my quarters, a narrow cell lined with relics of a family long vanished into service. Portraits painted in ochre and gilt, each depicting a single, unblinking eye.